Burke, Dina Guzder, Messiah Rhodes, Nermeen Sheikh, Maria Terracena, Charina Nadura, Sam Alcoff, Marie Astu, Joe John Hamilton, Robbie Karen, Honey Masood, and Mary Conlin. Our executive director is Julie Crosby. Special thanks to Becca Staley, John Randolph, Paul Powell, Mike DeFilippo, Miguel Noguera, Hugh Grant, Dennis Moynihan, David Prude, Dennis McCormick. I'm Amy Goodman. Stay safe.
WBNY Buffalo.
The views expressed on the following program are not necessarily those of 91.3 FM WBNY, the United Students Government of Buffalo State, or Buffalo State itself. Due to the opinionated nature of these programs, listener discretion is highly advised. If you have any questions or comments about today's program, you can give us a call at 716-878-5104.
To join Mr. Hare on today's Living for the People, dial 878-5104. That's 716-878-5104. Or go to facebook.com/91.3 WBNY and comment there. That's facebook.com/91.3 WBNY. Courtesy EWTN.
You know, this really was a surprise move by progressives. They teamed up with Republicans, band together to oppose Senator Joe Manchin's regulation, which would loosen oil and gas permitting regulations.
We haven't done anything with permitting, Brianna, for the last decade or more, and I don't see a pathway forward in the future. I'm the only Democrat that's ever voted for major permitting reform.
The Senate is expected to pass the CR either tonight or tomorrow. It will then move on to the House, where it'll likely pass because both sides do not want to have a government shutdown so close to the midterm election.
You know, it's so interesting. We're going to talk a little bit more, about this, but it's important for us to understand structurally what is going on here. Our budgets are for particular periods within a fiscal year. Our fiscal year federally runs October 1 of one year to September 30th of the following year. That's the budget. So when these budget resolutions are passed, they're not passed and last for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years. They end at the end of that fiscal year. You have to re-vote again on authorizing more money. Even though you're doing the same things, on October 1 that you were doing on September 30th, you still have to reauthorize the government to spend that money on October 1. So that's what's in front of us right now. It used to be, as I was talking to our producer, James Braun, earlier, it used to be that in February of a year, you would have a letter that would come essentially from the President of the United States to the public saying, these are the things that I'm considering in terms of the budget that I'm going to put together for this year. And then people get to, clap or cry or complain. And then the president takes that reaction and filters it, and he makes a more determinative decision about what he wants to propose as a budget. But remember, presidents only propose budgets, and they sign off on budgets that get enacted. But the presidents don't create the law that has to get enacted in Congress before it can be signed by the president. So he's on the front end in the sense that he or she makes the proposal for the budget. But then it goes to the House of Representatives and then to the Senate, and each of those houses have to agree on an exact language for a law that creates the budget for the year, going forward. Then that goes back to the president for the president to sign off on it. So the president has, 2 bites at the apple. He gets to frame what it is that he's interested in doing. And then he also gets to say yes or no, will I accept whatever it is that the Senate and the House produce? Well, we're at that stage right now, but I'm going to introduce the program, and I want to talk to you a little bit more about this stage that we're at right now, why this is so important for us to have this conversation. So this is L. Nathan here. Welcome you to our broadcast, Living for the People, focused on providing you insight into events shaping our national and regional world and the facts behind those events and policies that are shaping our world for the day and for tomorrow. Join us weekly on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. following Amy Goodman's Democracy Now! Program. And of course, our program is live, as you know, so you can call in and you can join our discussion. We really hope that you will. Our number here again is 716-878-5104. That's 716-878-5104. And of course, we've been admitted into the 21st century. I have to keep saying that because, you know, I've been alive a long time. The 21st century is real new for me. Okay? And all of the things that people have learned how to do, I haven't learned how to do those things yet. But we do have Willie H., who does the live streaming of our program. Welcome, Willie.
Welcome everybody for Living for the People with L. Nathan here. Welcome our Facebook viewers, of course, our phone callers, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube.
I mean, we're out there, right? We're also here with our producer, James Brown. Welcome, James.
Good morning, Mr. Hare.
And together, what we try to do is look at emerging facts and then try to understand what's bringing this particular set of facts to the fore at this time. And then try to think about, well, how should we view this? What does this mean in terms of how we should react as a public to what we see going on? And so that's what we do in this discussion. And we hope that you'll participate. If you're participating by Facebook or someplace, you know, where you have a video feed of the program, you can type in your questions, your concerns, or your observations, and we'll respond to as many as we can while we're on the air. So I want to take us back to this, what's been in front of us. Today is the day that the House of Representatives is receiving from the Senate a what they call a continuing resolution. Now, there's a lot of concepts that I want to make sure that we clearly understand as a public. A continuing resolution is what it sounds like. It allows the budget to continue going forward beyond today. But it's not a budget resolution for the year. So as I indicated before, in the previous eras, you know, when things were a little bit more understandable, I won't say rational, I'm just going to say understandable. In previous years, a budget message was sent out by the president. Then the president proposed a budget, usually in February or March. And then it was supposed to be that the budget was approved by the Senate and the House by the end of April, so that you would already know before you got to October 1 what the budget was going to be, and whatever you need to do to get ready for that, you'd be doing whatever you needed to do. That seemed to be sensible. You know, I mean, you'd have all of May, June, July, August, September. You'd have 5 months to get ready to do whatever the new budget was going to be talking about. Well, that was in the old days, you know, John Kennedy, Richard Nixon, you know, Gerald Ford, you know, the old days. The new days, the robust days, you know, of, you know, Bill Clinton and George W. Bush and Barack Obama and Donald Trump. The new days, now the budget itself is a hostage, and it's in a hostage condition all of the time. Just think about the budget as if somebody's got blindfolds on it. They got like the hood over the budget's head, and they got ropes, you know, tying the thing around its chest, you know, and chains on its feet. That's what's happening with the budget, and the budget can't move from point A to point B to get from, you know, 1 month to 2 months later without a new vote in Congress. Go ahead, James.
So how does Mr. Manchin get into
So
this part?
for Manchin, he has been the only Democratic senator who has been willing to vote for a change in the permitting process for how a new energy project gets authorized to be built. In other words, it's like when you build a house, you can't just go and buy a piece of land and start building a house on it, because the people next door may have something to say about it, right? Go ahead.
But how does this become involved with a stopgap measure in continuing the budget for the next year? Or
because
the
what
next 3 months?
Manchin is saying to the other Democrats is, it's so important to me to have a change in the permitting process for how new energy projects get started in the first place. It's so important to me that I'm not going to be willing to vote for a budget unless these changes that I'm recommending in the permitting process are included in the law that passes this continuing resolution. So that's where Manchin is coming from. The interesting thing is, virtually all of the Republicans agreed with this. They wanted to see the same change, because what does the change mean? It means instead of a project taking 5 to 7 years to get approved, and all during that approval process, You're spending money on directors, on analysts, on assayers, on people that do testing for where you put your pipes and all of the different things that get. I mean, the projects will cost at least twice what they were originally proposed to cost if it takes you 5 to 7 years to get the permitting process done. The permitting means that everybody who has a regulation or a law that governs some part of what you want to do in your energy project, they all have to be satisfied that their law or their regulation is being complied with in this project in order for the project to go forward. Well, this is a long and tedious and expensive process. That's where Manchin is coming from. Now, Bernie Sanders, you know, cousin Bernie, Bernie says, well, the reason why we take all this time is because we don't really want these fossil fuel projects in the first place. What Manchin is saying is the permitting process that I'm talking about doesn't just affect fossil fuel projects. It's wind, it's solar. You know yourself. You know someone that in our county who was upset because a windmill was within earshot, you know, of this person. They had to hear this windmill, you know, all the time, and it was irritating, you know, for this person. Well, you know, they got laws against irritating people too, so you have to comply with those things. So Manchin is with the Republicans on the issue of reducing the amount of time it takes to get projects off the ground through this permitting process. The Democrats have always been for slowing this stuff down so you can make sure that all the things you wanted to be, you know, complied with are actually complied with before the project gets underway. Manchin has held, you know, when you have a budget that, you know, you only got 50-50, you know, in the Senate. So you really need every single Democratic senator to get a budget resolution passed. So Manchin used his vote to say, I won't vote for, I'll be the Lone Ranger. I won't vote for anything unless you comply with this. You would have thought the Republicans would have said, yippee, that's what we wanted to have done. But the Republicans weren't happy with Joe Manchin because Joe Manchin went along with the Inflation Reduction Act and the CHIPS Manufacturing Act. He went along with that and gave his vote, you know, to the resolutions to lower inflation and launch getting manufacturing jobs back into the United States, all those things that the Inflation Reduction Act was passed to do. You would think that everybody would be okay with that, but that's not the way it goes politically in Washington now. Mitch McConnell, who was a champion of permitting reform, shortening the amount of time it takes to get these projects up and running, he's the one who says that putting this into this continuing resolution was a poison pill. You can't make this stuff up, right? So all of the Republicans were in support of the shortening of the time it takes to get these permits done. And all of the Republicans were going to vote against the continuing resolution that was going to have legislation in it to reduce the time it takes to get, you know, these projects up and running and whatnot. That's what's really, you know, at play here.
But didn't, so the soundbite goes, but the progressives and the Republicans ganged up together.
Right. Which you would never have thought,
Right.
you know, before. So you got Bernie, but their reasons are different. Bernie Sanders joins the Republicans in opposing the continuing resolution because he doesn't want to see any more fossil fuel projects approved, period. He don't want to see any more coal, any more oil, any more natural gas, you know, and so on. He doesn't want to see any of that stuff. He wants only wind and geothermal and solar, you know, and tidal, you know, et cetera. That's what he wants. So the Republicans were opposing the bill, not because of policy, but because they were mad at Joe Manchin for supporting the Inflation Reduction Act, which they felt that was a betrayal, right? So now, and I want you to understand that this whole thing is it's almost a hoax because the budget resolution only goes to December 16th.
And that's just it.
Right.
It's stopgap, but what, for 3 months?
Right. So what's the magic of the December 16th date? That's the last day that Congress does any work. Then they go home for Christmas, and they don't come back until probably a week or so before, you know, the whatever the budget meeting is that gets done in January. They're probably gone for 3 weeks, you know, for the Christmas a holiday. So that means nothing gets done. You have between now and December 16th to get stuff done. And if it doesn't get done, it just sits on the table and waits until the new Congress that was voted, on in the November elections of this year. Whoever the new Congress is, they get seated, I believe, on January 1 of the following year. Go ahead.
This is relating, but so my question is, because you just explained how people stay on these committees till, in other words, even if they were voted out, they can stay on these.
They're still on the committees until the end of December 31 of this year.
So does that mean Cheney stays on the?
Cheney is still on. She's
even
still
though she lost.
She's still a congresswoman.
Okay.
Her term doesn't end until 11:59 p.m. on December 31. So she's still doing her work. But the idea that you can hold the country hostage, which is what is being done, and it's not just being done by the Republicans. I want you to understand that Bernie Sanders was willing to hold everybody hostage unless he got his way on this permitting legislation to reduce the amount of time it took to get these projects approved. So it's not just Republicans. Now, the facetious thing about it is the Republicans fought for the CHIPS bill, to have semiconductor and microchip manufacturing move back from Taiwan and India and China and so on, to have those production operations done physically in the United States. And that would, of course, create, millions of jobs, in the United States. You would think everybody would be for that. But the Republicans weren't for it because they had danced with Ronald Reagan in the 1980s, and they financed the massive reduction in taxes and in how you taxed investment properties and physical properties. And as a consequence, they created so much room in lower taxes that those companies were able to take that revenue that they used to pay in taxes and use that revenue to finance moving their businesses, to Taiwan and Ireland and, other places that do that wound up getting this manufacturing business from the United States. Now, to get those companies to be willing to bring those jobs back into the United States, you'd have to move the manufacturing facilities back into the United States. And of course, that's going to cost money. So the Republicans were unwilling to do this unless you would make the tax laws more favorable for the Republicans, for their constituency, so that they would have the cash flow to be able to move stuff back into the United States. So we have all of these different dynamics, underway. The bottom line here is the fact that they put a clock on it, that instead of spending all of this energy to remember, Social Security is going to be Social Security. It doesn't matter who the president is. You still got X number of people that are on Social Security, X number of new people that are going to start getting Social Security benefits, X number of older people that are going to stop getting the benefits because they're not on the planet anymore. That system exists. Medicare system exists. Road repair system exists. All kinds of the activities, of government are going to exist. Why would you halt the government itself, the ability to govern the country itself, over specious little issues and whatnot, right? It just seems like that should not be done. And it used to not be done. It used to be that at this time of the year, you would have Democrats and Republicans railing at each other. We got to get this done. This has to be done by, September 30th. We can't wait. All this whining that people are doing, we can't hear all that whining. We got to get this done right now. That used to be the conversation. But because you all are younger and I'm a bit older, I remember those conversations because I was alive and heard those conversations being had in the policymaking community of the United States. But because things have changed over the past 40 years, you all have not heard that. All you've heard is the whining and people holding each other hostage, and what they call hostage taking and so on in the budget process. And so we find ourselves in this same situation where they literally plan on having a crisis of potential shutdowns 3 or 4 times a year, every year, forever. They just accepted this as this is the new budgeting process. That should not be. As a nation, we should say to these people, you serve us. We don't serve you. I expect you to produce a budget by April 1 of a year. I expect that budget to be approved by the Congress by May 30th of a year, or whatever it is that we decide we want to do. And so that we as a people, as a public, we have the ability to go forward. You should be bound by things that we as the public require you to do. We should not be bound by what you require us to do. We hire you. You're not hiring us. I mean, that just seems to me to be the most sensible, way to do this. So I just wanted people to understand that this is Magic Day. That's why I brought this up for this discussion for today. This is the day that the budget year, the fiscal year ends today. No matter what anybody says, at 11:59 tonight, the budget that was passed that we've been operating from, that we've been spending money from, that budget disappears. And you can't spend any more money out of that budget, except for those things that are mandatory. So you still have to spend your Social Security checks, and that sort of stuff. But much of the budget is not mandatory, it's discretionary. And that portion of the budget, not a dollar can be spent unless this continuing resolution is passed today. Go ahead.
Apparently, and I'm looking at your script, Mr. Hare, apparently money for Ukraine is also in this budget.
I'm glad you brought that up, because there's all these things that we think of as priorities, as Democrats or as progressives. They're in this budget, right? I mean, for Ukraine, there was $12.3 billion to help Ukraine. And why is this important? Ukraine is not a part of the continuing, budget, planning, for the United States. A year ago, we weren't talking about any funding for Ukraine. We didn't even know who Ukraine was. Who's Ukraine? Right? But when the Russians decided that they were going to snatch another part of another country, like they snatched Crimea, with Chechnya, was it Chernobyl, the nuclear plant?
Yeah, Chernobyl.
Right, Chernobyl.
Yeah.
That was a part of Ukraine, right?
Still is.
And
sort of.
And the Russians decided they were going to snatch territory out of Ukraine and say it's a part of Russia, on the basis that there were a lot of Russian speakers that lived in these areas. Well, there's a lot of French speakers that live in New York State. Would you want the how do you call it, Quebecois? The Quebec people, would it be okay for them to just snatch, 30 miles off of the northern border of New York State? You wouldn't go for that. That's what the Russians were doing, with Ukraine.
That's exactly. I was going to ask you, Mr. Hare, your thoughts on Vladimir Putin's election of sorts in these captured territories by the Russians.
See, and the reason why Putin is doing that is if he can create a, even though it's a lie, if he creates the visage that Donetsk and Luhansk, and these other provinces in the eastern part of Ukraine, if he says that these people have voted and they want to be a part of Russia, so now we've accepted their vote and they're now a part of Russia, we've annexed them, then he can say that it's not us invading Ukrainian territory, it's you Ukrainians invading Russian territory. And I can, because if these areas have been annexed, that means they're a part of Russia now. So if the Ukrainians are fighting to liberate, these areas, the Russians are arguing that that's the Ukrainians attacking Russia. Even though it was Russia that invaded Ukraine and is trying to steal Ukrainian land, by annexing these parts of Ukraine and saying that they are now a part of Russia, then the Russians can say that the Ukrainians are the bad guys because they're trying to invade our Russian territory. And so we have the right to respond any way we want to this invasion by the Ukrainians into our Russian territory. That's what this script is all about.
But isn't he holding this vote up to the world saying, see, the Ukrainians are voting for us. They like us.
Well, that's my point. But it's not even whether the
It isn't?
world likes us. They don't really care about that. What they care about is being able to create some sort of legal legitimacy to what the Russians have been doing. This is before these two votes were taken, in these two provinces in eastern Ukraine. The Russians appeared to be invading Ukraine, trying to attack Ukrainian territory.
Right.
But if the Ukrainian territory, parts of that territory become a part of Russia, so they're no longer Ukraine. They're now a part of Russia because Russia annexed them and says they're a part. And the proof that they're accepted is they had the vote in these provinces.
That's right.
And the citizens, 96%, 86%, whatever they claim, voted for accepting the idea that Ukraine or these provinces in Ukraine are now a part of Russia. Now Russia can say that this is Ukraine, this is Russia, not Ukraine, and you're attacking our territory. We're not attacking your territory. And so that's how they're justifying what they're doing. Remember, Russia has told their citizens that there's no war going on in Ukraine in the first place, that this is just a military operation trying to clean up some nonsense, on our southwestern front. Go ahead.
But Mr. Hare, it also looks like there was a severe traffic jam exiting Russia from.
Probably 300,000 people men have already left Russia.
That's where I was going.
Because they didn't want to get caught up in fighting this war.
Right.
Remember that wars, this goes back to Ronald Reagan's era. We've gone from having a citizen army to having a professional army. Essentially you get a signing bonus, if you enlist, 5,000, depending on whatever year it is. Sometimes it might be 20,000 you might get as a bonus for enlisting in the armed services. But we don't have a draft. Even though you still register for the draft, we don't actually have a conscription program. So the people who wind up being in our army are people who are, for all intents and purposes, like professional mercenaries. They're fighting for the United States, but this is a job. They join the armed forces as a job, and they get benefits for them, as a reward for joining the armed forces. So now you get these Russians who are in the same situation in their country, these men who are now finding out that we're not just doing a volunteer army anymore. Now we're going with conscription. So if you don't want to get drafted, you need to show up right now, or we're just going to come and snatch you up and put you into our armed forces. The problem with that is, if I'm a Russian, is the Ukrainians are fighting tooth and nail for everything that makes them Ukraine, everything that validates their existence is on the line right now. This is like somebody coming to my house. I'm going to fight you tooth and nail for my house. That's my last stand, is my house. I'm going to fight you as hard as I can. Well, that's what the Ukrainians are doing. But the Russians who are being called up by their government, what are they going to fight for? They don't get anything out of it. They don't want. Why are we fighting Ukraine in the first place? I thought the Ukrainians were our friends, and so on. So that's where we are. Can I just quickly say something to you about gas prices? I just wanted to help you understand something. I went back and looked at gas prices over the course of the past 20 years to try to understand the relationship between gas prices and the price of a barrel of oil. It's not real easy to understand what this relationship is, so I put it into a percentage construct. What is the price of gasoline as a percentage of the price of a barrel of oil, so that I could see if there's a relationship between the increases in the price of a barrel of oil and the increases in gas prices. And it's interesting. Excuse me. If you look at from 2007 on, the price of a gas of a gallon of a gallon of gas was about 3.4% of the price of a barrel of oil. That seemed to be the consistency all the way through 2010. What was the magic thing that happened in 2010? That was the end of the Great Recession. The Great Recession began at the end of 2007 and it ended in the spring area of 2010. So during that Great Recession, there was less demand for gasoline. So these people that were making all of these production facilities, getting more and more gasoline, or oil being produced and whatnot, so they could have more and more oil to sell. All of a sudden, the market to buy the oil wasn't there. So they started losing money. Now recovery occurs. Barack Obama gets to become president, and within a year and a half, recovery occurs. Now we're back into a peacetime expansion that continued all the way through the end of his administration. But in the consequence of that was more people were getting employed, more people had money and began to spend their money on things that involved utilizing oil-based products. And so the oil companies use that opportunity to not just sell more oil, but to jack up the price of oil, and not just to sell more gasoline, but to jack up the price of gasoline. So they jacked up the price of gasoline so that it was no longer 3.5% of a barrel of oil. It became 4.5, 4.4, 4.6% of a barrel of oil. That's a 25% increase in the price of gasoline that got baked into the structure of how oil gets produced and marketed in the world. So it's almost like there's this automatic trigger. If oil prices go up $10, then there's a whatever the percentage of that is that goes into gasoline, that goes up 25%. So your cost for gasoline goes up 25%, and you can see it in these price relationships between the cost of a gallon of gasoline and the price of a barrel of oil. It's important for us to understand this. Many times I've said to us that the only leverage that we have is our control of demand. If you make less of a demand for something, they will lower the price because they want you to buy what they make. They can't make any money if you're not buying what they make. So if they're being abusive in their pricing, stop buying it, even if it is inconvenient for you. If it means you have to walk to the store that's 2 blocks or 3 blocks away, so you don't have to spend gas to go to go get whatever you're going to get from the corner store, walk the 3 blocks and keep that money in your pocket.
It's also healthier.
It's healthier, it makes your legs work, and so on, right? I mean, to me, we have to defend ourselves the best way we can. The one thing that we have that's completely under our control is demand. If you make less demand for something, they will lower the price because they want to sell you what it is that they make. So let's just be accountable to each other and do the things that are necessary in order for us to control our reality. We can be disciplined and we can be effective as a community of people. Listen, we're going to take a quick break and talk to our sponsors, so don't go away. We will see you on the other side of the break here at Living for the People at 91.3 FM WBNY.
What if one day you went to your secret hiding place and instead of what you came for, you found a phone number, 1-800-662-HELP? What would you do? Would you stop and give it some thought? Before drugs take their toll on you and your family, know that there is help. You can quit. For help with drug use, call 1-800-662-HELP for free and confidential information and treatment referral, or go to samhsa.gov/knowtherisks.
It's easier than you think for pests to threaten your family's health. Ticks, which spread dangerous diseases, hide in tall grasses and even on your pets. Rodents easily invade your home, contaminate food, and can carry more than 35 diseases. Mosquitoes, which breed in standing water, transmit many diseases. Get the facts you need to protect your family at pestworld.org. It's that easy.
To join Mr. Hare on today's Living for the People, dial 878-5104. That's 716-878-5104. Or go to facebook.com/91.3 WBNY and comment there. That's facebook.com/91.3 WBNY, courtesy MSNBC.
Republicans love to blame crime on Democrats and liberal policies. But here's the thing. Among the 10 states with the highest murder rates in 2020, 8 voted for Trump. That's according to a new report by the centrist group Third Way.
Crime rates and murder rates in particular in red states have habitually been higher than blue states. The policies, obviously, that are in these red states are not working because the crime rates and the murder rates are simply higher.
You know, sometimes the best educator or illustrator of what's going on is your own eyes. You have to look with your own eyes. Stop letting people tell you what your eyes are seeing. Let your eyes tell you what your eyes are seeing. The reality is that all of these, Republican, semi-nationalists, whatever they call themselves, kind of folks, that their policies that they claim that are their policy based, what their policies are organized around, clearly don't work. The things that they say are supposed to work, just tough on crime stuff, well, they're all tough on crime, and they have the most crime in the country. So again, if you're trying to go someplace and you look up and you find a sign that says that you're going in the opposite direction that you intended to go, the first thing you should do is stop doing what you're doing. Stop driving. Just stop the car so you don't go any further in the wrong direction. Then figure out what is the right direction and turn yourself around. If we're going in the wrong direction under the policies of these, law and order type people, we should stop what we're doing and reassess and make different decisions about how we conduct ourselves. But before I get too far off on that, I just want to make sure that we are all being accountable to our fellow Americans. Now, I know some of you feel bad. I have neighbors that fly to Florida, sometime around, mid to late part of October or early November. I feel bad about that. Why you guys leaving me? Right? They go down there where it's warm and they hang out until like late April or early May. Then they come back home, but they're my friends. They're my cousins. They're my brothers and sisters. They're the people, they're my neighbors and so on. And they are getting killed, by this what they call Ian, I-A-N, Ian storm. This is such a humongously big storm. I don't know if you all have been following the scale of what this is. It's not that the winds are so much stronger than they've ever been. We've had storms that have stronger winds than we've seen in Ian. But Ian covers a humongously large area. Literally the entire state of Florida was in the swirl, the little eye of the hurricane, and then its swirl that's around the eye. Literally the entire state of Florida was in that swirl. There's water casting up on places that have never been flooded, in the past and so on. Water's flushing down streets. But what's interesting is this is the water from the ocean or the Gulf, depending on which side of Florida you're on, that's washing up. So as the storm moves, the power that was sweeping that water inland, that power is moving with the storm. So behind where the storm was, the water is draining pretty quickly. But don't feel great about that, because when the water gets done draining, what do you see? You see the house that used to be at 417 Landon Street is now at 114 Landon Street. It's been floated away. Cars that used to be out in front of your house are now in front of somebody's house 2 blocks away. I mean, this is a humongously destructive storm that we have gone through. James, it points to something that we've talked about a number of times. I don't know how to get enough support for what I'm talking about, other than just continuing to talk about it. We know that these storms are going to occur. Nothing is going to prevent these storms from happening. They are going to happen. Even if we do all the climate change remission stuff that we claim that we want to do, still not going to stop the fact that you're going to get 17 or 18 of these hurricanes in the Caribbean basin every single year. That's just going to occur. Here's the other thing that we can deal with is the rise in the ocean water levels. That's happening because of global warming, because the air is getting warmer, the ice shelf is melting faster. So you're getting more and more water spread out, in the oceans. The water has to go someplace. The oceans don't get deeper. So, the floor of the ocean is still going to be the floor of the ocean. So the water spreads out over land. What we can do is we can control where that water goes. That's got to be the fight. Now, this is a fight that I know I'm the only one, raising this issue, right? But I'm saying to us that if you direct the water, you create, concrete or, something reinforced, channels. So when the water comes sweeping in, you have levees that keep the water from coming in, in some long spaces. And then in between, you have places where the water can go essentially like a water street, like a canal, an uncovered canal, and have that water go someplace inland where you can create, reservoirs, or you can let the land itself, absorb the water. And of course, that's going to be salty water. So you're not going to be able to grow crops, on that. But, maybe there are other technologies that we can develop to take the salt out of the water that's less expensive than what they have right now. Go ahead.
Would this be an opportunity, Mr. Hare, for the president perhaps to have a press conference, but say, listen, Florida's in trouble. We are all Americans. So we together are going to help out these people in need. They're Americans. We are all Americans. It's not as though, New York is New York State. We're,
Right.
We're going to
Right.
ship migrants up there.
Right.
All this. We're all Americans. Let's
Well,
let's bond together.
We have this hate campaign going on, amongst the Trumpites, in this country against California, that they're the warm weather elite snob type people and whatnot. But the Colorado River, that water feeds Wyoming, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, parts of California. It even feeds fresh water to Mexico. And that basin that it feeds, the water is drawn from, is Lake Mead. But Lake Mead today is only a third of the size that Lake Mead was when I was a young guy at, 10, 15 years old. Lake Mead was 3 times the size that it is right now, because global warming means you also have drier areas, because things are hotter. Areas that used to be moist become drier, and so on. So what we're seeing is an evaporation, a consumption of water from that aquifer that is Lake Mead. The consumption of that water is increasing faster than new water going into that reservoir is increasing. So eventually there's not going to be any water left. And they have pipes that they use to pump water out of Lake Mead to send that water downriver to get to all of the other consumers of fresh water, from that lake. Well, even the pipes aren't going to work anymore, because the pipes are not on the bottom of Lake Mead. They're up along the sides of Lake Mead. So if the water gets down to too low a level, you won't be able to get the water into the pipes in the first place, because the pipes will be above the water. So that all of us have to be in this conversation. We all got to be figuring this thing out. So I'm just saying this first, that we need to pray for our brothers and sisters in Florida, and those that may even be up coast, in Georgia. And I believe this hurricane, it'll be less of a hurricane, be more of a tropical storm, will bounce off of South Carolina, North Carolina, may get as far as Virginia, maybe pieces of it will get. Often pieces of these tropical storms will go all the way up to Newfoundland. They will get up into Canada, on the Atlantic or Arctic coast, of Canada. So, all of these things are connected. All of us are connected. We all share the same air, the same planet, the same water. We all have a accountable responsibility to do things that will help each other to stay safe in this world.
Can I say
Mhm.
a question related to the bite, if that's okay?
Sure.
Republicans, and I notice on Fox, they keep on saying how these cities, these Democrat cities,
Mhm.
house the crime. This bite that makes it clear what this newer bite is talking about is the blue states. there's a difference between states and
And
cities.
cities, right?
So they're saying, well, look, these Republican states, they have a lot of crime. It seems to me that both the red cities and the blue state, they all have crime.
The reality is that there is more crime in those cities. Of the 100 largest cities in the United States, only 26 of them are headed by a Democratic mayor. The other 74 are headed by Republican mayors. Their crime rates in those Republican-controlled cities are higher than the crime rates in those 26 Democratic-controlled cities. Now, when I say controlled cities, I'm talking about cities that have a population of 100,000 people or more. Okay, and I'm not saying that Democrats' policies are necessarily any better. I mean, I don't have any quantitative analysis that says, well, the Democrats have this and this and this, policy, and the Republicans don't have it in their areas. And here's the incidence of crime, in the Democratic areas, here's the incidence of crime. And I don't have that data, and I haven't seen anything that pulls that data together that way. What is clear, though, is the murder rates in these 8 out of 10 Republican-controlled areas, urban areas. 8 out of 10 of those Republican-controlled areas, or those areas are Republican-controlled, and those areas have higher crime rates than the 2 out of 10 that are controlled, by Democrats.
It just seems to me to be labeling or singling out Democrats as being. It's almost like saying, you know what, Democrats are pro-crime.
Well, that's exactly what they're saying. That's what Republicans have been saying, and then it puts you in a position where you have to respond to this by referring to Republican tag name, Republican labeling. You don't have any choice, because Republicans are labeling you in a way that politicizes people's perception of you. If you don't respond to it, then the public accepts what's being said about you, right? So you just have to step to it. They saw an alarming rate, almost a 30% increase in the murder rates in 2020 over 2019. While the 2021 data is not complete, the murder rate was on the rise again over this past year. Just what you were talking about, blue cities like Chicago, Baltimore, and Philadelphia have seen real and persistent increases in homicides. But other cities like Los Angeles, New York, Minneapolis, places that are controlled by Democratic administrations, are also places with wall-to-wall media coverage, but they don't have the high rate of murder and crime. Their crime rates are going down rather than going up. There's a large piece of the homicide story that is missing and calls into question the veracity of the right-wing obsession over homicides. Murder rates are far higher in Trump voting red states than Biden voting blue states. And sometimes murder rates are highest in cities with Republican mayors. The reason why we were just taking a look at this is that we get politicized by the way that people who have the ability to get their message out in the media, how they frame things that make us think that their framing is speaking things that are true. And in reality, they're not even bothering to research what they're saying. They're just saying that something is true. For example, last year and the year before last, we were talking a lot about immigration and where crime was coming in relation to immigrants coming into this country. And everything the Republicans said was these immigrants are bringing crime. Trump talked about them when he came down the escalator. They had calves as big as watermelons and, from carrying drugs, on their back, just insane stuff, right? That they were murderers and they were rapists, et cetera. Turns out that none of that is true. I mean, absolutely none of that is true. The crime rates for people who are illegal immigrants that come into the United States, their crime rates per capita are lower than the crime rates for American citizens as a whole.
Wow.
We Americans are much more likely to be crooked than the people that came here crookedly from Venezuela and Panama and places like that. Now, I'm not saying that to promote bringing more people from Venezuela and Panama and whatnot into the United States. I'm not saying that to say that we as Americans, that there's something wrong with us. I'm not saying that.
Well, didn't you mention before that we have more crime than the rest of the world? Is that true?
On the planet.
On the planet, wow.
on the planet. In fact, they tested some
Wow.
people over around Alpha Centauri, some other galaxy and whatnot. And they said, man, they got more crime than they got any other galaxy over there. These Americans are dangerous people to live around. The reality is we are dangerous people to live around. I mean, we run our mouths and we talk all of this stuff like we're so exceptional, but the truth is we are exceptional in a lot of ways. But there's also a price that we pay for our exceptionalism, because our exceptionalism is based on our individualism, and there's a price you pay for your individualism, right? We have Americans that will pull guns on state troopers and U.S. Marshals.
Yeah.
They will pull guns on them about their cattle grazing on parkland that's owned by the federal government. They pull guns out on people over things like that. Who else on earth has people in their country that will pull out AR-15s or M16s and point them at the soldiers of their country? Who on earth does that? Nobody other than us. We act like we're the exceptional people. We do things that are an exception to all normal behavior, on earth. So again, I don't want to be chastising us that we're not, the best that we could be. I'm just saying that we need to take our eyes off of comparing ourselves between this person and that person and look at what is it that we actually want to be. What do we want to turn ourselves into? What's our ideal? And then test all of our decisions about how far it moves us along the path of getting to our ideal. All these other extraneous issues about Democratic mayors and Republican mayors, they're irrelevant. If you're a mayor and there's some crime rates going on that are not good in your city, we're going to fire you unless you can come up with some new ideas. We're going to fire you and we're going to hire somebody else that has a better idea, period. It doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat or Republican. Either you can do the job or you can't. It's the issue I have with the Buffalo Board of Education. We're spending $1 billion to educate 30,000 kids. That's $30,000 a child, per year. You're telling me that you can't get this done? If I put this child over at Nichols Academy or the Park School, I could spend $17,000 to $20,000 on that child, and they'll all be reading at the 14th grade level when they're juniors in high school and so on. And they're robust. They're getting it done academically. If I can't get what I want from you and I'm paying you the money and you can't get it from me, you can't do it for me, then I need to hire somebody else to do it for me. I'm not going to sit here and whine about whether you're a Democrat or you're a Republican. What's that got to do with it, right? We have to look at what actually produces the outcomes that we want for ourselves as a community of people. I believe you have a caller hanging on. Let me grab that caller real quick. Hi, caller. Are you there?
Hi, Mr. Hare. How you
Hi,
doing
hey,
today?
James. How you doing?
Pretty good. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is begging the U.S. federal government for hurricane disaster relief money.
No, he wouldn't ask Biden for that. No, he says Biden's a horrible person.
Really? Write a letter to the president. Give them nothing. Damn low tax state. That's what they get.
See, the reality is the people that get hurt by the stuff that Ron DeSantis and his friends do are the people that live in Florida. And the president of the United States is not going to hurt the people that live in Florida because Ron DeSantis is behaving like, I can't say it, but
Hey, they voted for him. They get what they deserve. They're a deregulated coastal building, no zoning law state. So let them drown. Let them get typhoid and cholera from the overflowing.
Well, I'm not willing to go like that. My thing is, it's just like the issues with the levees in Florida. It's not that people didn't know how to defend New Orleans from the water tide coming in, from the Gulf of Mexico. They knew how to do that. They just didn't do it. When money was allocated by the federal government, for Teddy Roosevelt, onward, they allocated big money. I mean, if you're talking about 1920 money, you're talking about $1 billion in 1920 money is probably $6 or $7 or $8 billion today. They were allocating that kind of money back in the 1920s and 1930s when Huey Long, was the governor in Louisiana. But they took the money and they gave it to the casino owners, to the fat cats, to the landed gentry, amongst the.
And by the way, they assassinated Huey Long.
And they killed Huey Long, right?
Yeah.
Because Huey Long was like a Robin Hood. You have to study his history. It's Huey and Long, Long. You should study his history because he literally is Robin Hood. I mean, he was doing crooked stuff. He's a crook, right?
But Robin Hood was a kind of crook
Right,
too.
right. But Huey Long was doing stuff to help people, in the bayou areas, and the people that usually didn't get help. He was the one trying to help them.
His crime was he stole from the rich.
Yeah,
and gave to the poor.
And gave to the poor.
Like Robin
I'm
Hood.
telling you, he was the Robin Hood of his era.
That's the biggest crime in America. If you do that, you're going to prison. Or
That's the biggest crime. Wow.
I love it. Yep. You're absolutely right.
None of this should have happened in Florida or New Orleans because no one should be allowed to build within a mile of wetlands because wetlands are buffer zones,
Right.
and Florida's
Right.
home building industry got
Right.
greedy. Look at how they build right up to the coastline. That's
Yep.
crazy.
Yep.
It should be illegal.
People want to have the ocean as their backyard. They want to walk out of their house and walk physically, almost dive directly into the
Yeah,
ocean.
I think most
right?
people want that.
No, not the most people do. I don't want that.
You don't want that?
I'm a most person. I don't want that. I mean, I'll go to the beach. Right?
You really don't want to live on the beach?
No,
Right. I think
Really?
I would think
No.
most people would want
Wow.
that.
no, don't want that
No,
at all.
that's suicidal. That area should be buffer zone. It should be left as a nature reserve.
You mean to
And
tell
by the way,
me?
Biden needs to go to Mar-a-Lago and toss rolls of paper towels at them.
There you go. Some bounty, paper towels. You just throw some rolls at them and whatnot, right? Say this is
Yep.
this is for Donald, and throw that stuff out there. But absolutely,
And by the way, the hurricane missed Mar-a-Lago. It had one job to do: take out Mar-a-Lago, and it missed.
and it missed.
You know?
Well, they got some
All right, I'm
wind.
out of here.
Yeah, thanks, man. They got some wind,
Yeah.
so they didn't get all of it. Did
Well,
I-
I don't know, guys. It ain't Marco, so I don't know. Maybe God is on his side. I don't know.
Did I have another little note that I wanted to share with you guys? I think I did. We only got about 3 minutes left in today's program, but this was this was the case of the off-duty Massachusetts National Guard person who he tailed a Florida school bus. This is what I mean about this behavior of Ron DeSantis and these MAGA, Republicans. They end up becoming an echo chamber amongst themselves, and they reinforce ideation inside their heads. They come to believe it as if it's true. Then they act on that ideation as if their ideation is true. This guy took the Ron DeSantis claim that there was invasions, coming into Florida from Ecuador, which is not true. There were illegal migrants coming across the Texas border. He actually went and paid people to recruit people from the Texas border, taking your Florida taxpayer money, have those people flown to Florida, and then have the people flown from Florida to Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts, just so he could make the point that, this is what, an invasion of these illegal immigrants, looks like. They show up any place they want to show up. They have no resources, and you have to do something about it. Well, one side of it is the people that lived in Martha's Vineyard did something about it. They took their infrastructure of community services and they made sure these people had food, clothing, shelter, medical care. They got mental health services, and they helped these people to get resettled, someplace else in Massachusetts, and then make other more permanent decisions about how these people were going to live. That's what the people in Massachusetts did, not what the people in Florida, were doing. So it's important for us to understand that side of it. The other side of it, though, is that Ron DeSantis has people thinking that it's proper, for you to literally attack these people that are coming across the border, because being an illegal immigrant is some sort of criminal thing by itself. That's how Ron DeSantis is making it appear. But the reality is that that's simply not a right way to think. The consequence was this fellow who was an off-duty Massachusetts National Guard, now they retired. He's still in the National Guard. He saw a bus that had some old people, on the bus, and he took it that's more of those doggone immigrants and whatnot. Now, why he would think that a bus full of old people were the people that were walking across the Rio Grande on foot, going through desert and jungle and rocks and, whatever it is they're going through to get to the United States, why he would think they would all be old people. You would think that most old people couldn't make that trip. But this guy thought that made sense. And so he said he pursued the tour bus for at least 10 miles to their hotel in East Falmouth. And later he confronted the bus driver, a guy named Michael Vaughn. He said he thought that these were immigrants on the bus. And Michael Vaughn told him that, no, you're totally wrong. These are retired people that are just taking a tour on my bus. It says bus tour on the bus. Right? He says in a live stream footage posted to the service members' Facebook, obtained by Cape Cod Times, he captures part of the progressive or the aggressive pursuit. He says, look at this. This is the guy talking. Look at this. He's heard saying, he says, a busload. I saw it coming. He said, I saw it coming over the bridge. I'm going to follow it. I was supposed to turn it off and go home, but here we go. And so he finally gets to confront these people on the bus. He even gets on the bus and he's inspecting the people on the bus. He said he has a right to do that because I have every right, quoting him, I have every right as a U.S. citizen to see what's going on. You know what I'm talking about. Now, I know what you're talking about. You think that you're the God over these other people, that they're below you. And because you're an American, you're above them. That's what you think, that you have powers that you really don't have. That's what Ron DeSantis is sowing into the population of people in this country. We need to be really conscious about what's going on here and not allow that to become something that's normalized in our country. You got a choice. You know, he's trying to put himself up in 2024. If I were you, I'd be careful. Listen, we're done for today. We look forward to talking to you all on Monday here at Living for the People at 91.3 FM WBNY. We'll see you all then.
WBNY Buffalo. Those people looking for the Latinas show, which normally airs at this time, will not be on today. It will, however, continue to be carried on 91.3 FM WBNY. So the Latinas show will not air today, but it will air in the future at this time.